سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. This is the second lecture in Family Fiqh 1. It's, as we know, the course intended for those who study it to get to know about the rulings of marriage and what comes before marriage, and if marriage didn't work as people want it to be, what are still the regulations and the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regulating the life of the human being in general and every specific detail in it, talking about marriage and divorce and other issues relating to this subject. Inshallah, this lecture will discuss about something that has to happen or usually happens before the contract of marriage is to be done, and that is al-khitbah, which is an Arabic word that's usually translated as engagement. We talked last time that for a person to get married, and after talking about the virtues of marriage and the wisdom behind marriage and so on, someone that wants to get married, he should first look into the matter in a very careful way, search for the future wife, and the same thing for the wife. Her guardian should look for the best person for her. And the criteria usually that we should base our choices on is based on the religion of Islam, the righteousness, things that would benefit the person in the hereafter, and so on and so forth. And this is something that also needs to be dealt with so much carefulness, because this is such an important level, and a person can suffer so much, a great deal, or the opposite, depending on the choice. That's why a person, it's good to make istikhara and to ask and to be religious and to be righteous and to choose those who are righteous and religious. But when we talk about the matters of fiqh from the fiqh point of view, we talk about now the next level, which is the level of engagement. Person choosing a wife or thinking about getting to be married to someone. What is this engagement or khitbah? What's the regulations in the religion of Islam? Because people, either they would follow their desires or they follow the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in anything, whether it's marriage or khitbah or anything else in our life, people either would follow the revelation from Allah, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or they would follow their culture and their desires. And this is one of the areas where there's so much culture, there's so much desires involved, and this is how we have to make sure that we first know the proper knowledge and we act according to it, and we teach people according to what's in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We'll talk mainly about 4 or maybe 5 points. The first point is, what is the engagement, what it means, and what's the conditions for it, and what's the outcome or the effects as a result of engagement. Also, if there is an engagement and people decide that this is not the best decision and they don't want to go ahead and get married, what is the outcome of that? Because once a person is in a form of a relationship, even if it's not married yet, there might be some complications as a result of departing from one another. So what is that in matters of fiqh? And also whether there is something to be done as a ta'weed, or some form of money involved, things of that nature. If a person would abuse the matter of departing from the engagement, whether someone should have some form of fees or penalties or whatever there is as a result of breaking the khitbah. Also, if the mahr has been given during the khitbah, and the mahr is something that is mandatory in matters of the marriage, and can the person receive his mahr back, the dowry, or not, and the gifts and things of that is involved in matters of khitbah, and what's the ruling with regarding to these things, because these are rights and physical money and things of that nature. First, when we talk about al-khitbah, what is the reality of it? How can we define engagement in Islam? Engagement in Islam is basically nothing but a promise between two parties that they would get married in the future, and that's it. There is no rituals when it comes to al-khitbah, no rituals when it comes to engagement. It doesn't have to have a certain form of a gathering or certain things to be said, like the case in marriage. There is no walima or food or whatever there is with it. There is nothing whatsoever of a rituality. There is no orders in the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that you have to say a certain dhikr or recite the Fatiha, for example, or to shake hands or to have rings, and all of these types of things has nothing to do with the deen of Islam. Engagement in Islam is nothing but a promise between the two parties for a future marriage that they hope that it will occur, and nothing else. Because if we define it properly, we'll get to understand the obligations that comes after that, and the outcome and the circumstances of things, and if it didn't work out, what is the outcome of that? It's nothing but a promise, and it's not like marriage. Why? Because once a person just gives a promise, if he wants to take that promise back, it is not something that is mandatory that he has to get married to the one that he's engaged to. And the same thing for the guardian of the wife. It's just nothing but a promise that was given, and if things didn't work out, because engagement has a purpose to it, as it will come inshallah ta'ala, person discovers that this is not the right person, it's better off that they would separate at this moment when there is no marriage yet, rather than just forcing oneself to get married into a relationship that he doesn't feel right about, that will cause even more harm and a bigger evil as a result of continuing with such a relationship. So as a result of that, if it's just a promise, so when we talk about a sigha, or if there is any wording that has to be said, like the case of marriage, or any rituals that has to be done, the answer is no. It's basically just a promise. It can be done with many different ways. A person would go to the family of the wife and he would say that, that he wants to get married to her, whatever there is, and he would get to see, of course, the future wife and things of that nature as it will come inshallah ta'ala. So there's no specific statement or any thing of that nature that a person has to take to be called that he is engaged. A lot of people, they do the Surah Al-Fatiha, they recite Surah Al-Fatiha as a result of this, and this has nothing to do with the religion of Islam. They do it seeking blessings of it and so on, but this is something that is innovation in the religion, if people would think that this is part of getting the engagement happening. And some of them, they would not consider the engagement in place unless they would have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha, which is something that is innovation in the religion. There is no such a thing in the deen of Islam, because we get to know what's in the religion of Islam based on the Quran and the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and there are some rulings when it comes to matters of khitbah, but this is not one of which. Also, the ulama, they talked about the conditions for the khitbah. Conditions meaning that it's something that is not part of the act itself, something that is outside of it, but if it's not fulfilled, then what we're talking about won't be fulfilled. Like one of the conditions of salah is wudu. Wudu is not part of the salah, but it's something outside the salah. It has to be done. If it's not done, then the salah is not valid. So one of the conditions or major thing that is mentioned when it comes to khutbah, that it should not be of any form of a transgression against other rights. And we'll try to explain and understand what does that mean. That the khutbah or the engagement should not go beyond and should not transgress to hurt others or to abuse the rights of others. So, for example, is it permissible for a man to seek marriage from a married woman? Of course not. That's not permissible. This is haram, and nobody would even have a doubt that this is something that is such an evil thing, right? So why? Because he's transgressing his limits. He's causing evil and he's causing harm that way if he would try to get married to someone that is already married. So from this we get to know that the condition is of khutbah or engagement, it does not transgress the rights and abuse the rights of others. But other things needs more explanation to it. This is an obvious example that we heard. But we need to discuss some things that need more details. Like what? For example, a woman that was divorced. Is it permissible for a man to seek marriage from her, meaning to be engaged to her and to get married? And when is that? When is that permissible? And this is something that needs to have more details, which is, as they call it, khidbat al-mu'tadda. When a woman gets divorced, there is a period which is the period of iddah, that inshallah we'll discuss it in more details, which this iddah is different from whether it's divorce or the marriage was terminated as a result of death of the husband. So there's a period of iddah in which the woman is not permissible for her to get married till this period is finished. After the divorce, if a woman gets divorced, if it's a divorce, the divorce is kind, as it will come inshallah ta'ala. So if the divorce is not final, is not ba'in, meaning that it's the first divorce or the second divorce, because it's only 3 divorces, and then after that if a man divorces his wife for 3 times, it is not permissible for them to be together again till she is married to someone else for the good intention that this is a real marriage, forever marriage. And if it happened that they divorced and the iddah is passed and the old relationship wants to get back together again, then it's permissible, but not as a trick, but as a way that it happens by the good intentions and so on. So, but this is another subject. But we're talking here about the different types of divorces and the effect of that on the khitbah. So if the divorce is the first divorce or the second divorce, and the woman is still in her period of al-iddah, which is 3 quru, which is 3 menstruum periods, 3 menses. In this period, she is basically still under the boundaries of the marriage of her husband. And that's why, as it will come inshallah when we talk about the divorce, that she has to be in the house of her husband. So in that period, for that case, it is not permissible for anyone to ask for marriage to that woman, or even in a direct way, or even in an indirect way. It is not permissible, it is haram for a person to do that, because she's still under the fold of marriage, even though she was divorced. But in that period, her husband can take her back without having to do a new contract, and she's supposed to be in his home, and she is not haram on him, because once they have a relationship, then they're back together again. So in that case, al-mu'tadda, the one in her iddah from a talaq raj'i, from a divorce, there is can be returned back again in the period of al-iddah. It is not permissible to directly or indirectly ask for marriage or khitbah or engagement. When we talk about the second type of iddah, if a woman, her husband died. If a woman, her husband died, and this is something that is mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah and others, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to the believers, وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِيمَا عَرَّضْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ خِطْبَةِ النِّسَاءِ أَوْ أَكْنَنْتُمْ فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ سَتَذْكُرُونَهُنَّ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُوَاعِدُوهُنَّ سِرًّا إِلَّا أَنْ تَقُولُوا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. Which means here that it's a permissibility to ask a woman for engagement in an indirect way when she is in her period of al-iddah, but this is the iddah of her husband died, iddah after the death of the husband. If you remember, we talked in the beginning of the condition of al-khitbah or engagement, that it does not transgress and abuse the rights of others. Here a case where the husband died, so there's no more rights or no more abuse to this person that died, but out of the goodness that used to be present between the husband and the wife, and out of the goodness of the relationship that should be present between the wife or the widow and the family of her husband, it is not permissible for her to get married immediately after the death of the husband, but she has to wait for 4 months and 10 days, as it's mentioned clearly in the Quran, which is a longer period than a divorce, because now there is grief, there is certain emotions, so the loyalty has to be there. So it's 4 months and 10 days in which there are certain rulings that pertains to the woman. We'll discuss it inshallah ta'ala when we talk about that later on. But we're talking here about the issue of al-khitbah, the engagement. Is it permissible for a man to ask a wife in that period for marriage, to be engaged to her? A direct way, it is not permissible, of course. But the ayah says something that is indirect. For example, if the man would say to the woman something like, someone like you, everybody would like to get married to. If she can get this message, of course, in a halal way, that someone is saying about her that she is someone that everybody would want to get married to her. For example, after the iddah. This is an indirect way, as if he is seeking that marriage and seeking this engagement, but this is only an indirect way, and of course without having any haram to be done, and we have to know what is haram and what is halal. So in that case, it is permissible to do it in indirect as it's mentioned in the Quran. A third case, which is a woman that is divorced, but the divorce is ba'in, meaning if she wants to return back to her husband, either she has to have a new contract or she can't unless she get married and so on. That means there's no rights here of her husband. She get married, she get divorced, and there's no rights of her husband. Like for example, khula, in which the woman would seek to terminate the relationship. In that case, there is no rights of her husband. Once the khula is done, he has no authority whatsoever to take her back, which is different than the talaq which we mentioned in the first case. So if the talaq is something that is final and there is no authority and no rights of the husband to take his wife back, in that case she's still in her iddah, right? And still in the period that she's not supposed to get married till it's finished. In this iddah, is it permissible for someone to seek marriage from that woman, to get engaged to her? This is something that we have, as we know, direct way of asking and an indirect way. The direct way, it's not permissible, right? It's not permissible to directly want to or to engage to such a woman, because as we said, that al-khitbah is only a promise. So if it's said, that means khitbah has happened. It's not something that has a ritual to it. So if she's still in the iddah, as a rule, at all forms of iddah, all forms of after divorce, the iddah of someone that her husband died or divorce, whether it's a divorce that the husband has the authority to take her back, or a final divorce, still it is not permissible whatsoever for any direct way of khutbah. No khutbah is permissible. The only thing that has the issue that we need to talk about is the indirect words or something like that, that would intend or means that after the iddah is over, there is an indirect speech here, that he would want to, for example, be engaged to that woman, but an indirect way. In the case of the final divorce, is it permissible for a man to indirectly, during the iddah, mention something about that he wants to get married to this woman or not? There are differences of opinions. When we say about differences of opinions, it doesn't mean that we can pick and choose anything that we like or what we desire, what's easier in our situation or so. No, and this is such a dangerous thing, especially a person studying matters of fiqh and seeing the differences of opinion. We have to understand that it's not based on a tashahi, on desires, that we pick and choose from the differences of opinions of the ulama. The goal is to find the truth. But why we mention the differences of opinion? Because something that is a fact. And then the person would have to follow what is strong with the evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah, and not to pick and choose based on easiness or desire or whatever there is. According to Madhab Imam Hanifa, rahimahullah, he said that the woman that divorced and the divorce is final, it is not permissible to do the indirect. Of course, with the direct one, we agree that no khitbah, no engagement is permissible. But we're only talking now about the indirect speech to say someone like you would always be someone that anybody wants to get married to, and things of that nature. According to the madhab of al-Ahnaf, it is not permissible even to do this indirect want to get engaged. And why? Because this can bring so much evil, they say, which is true. It can bring so much evil, in which the woman, for example, might lie about the iddah. She wants to finish it early because she wants to get married, for example, to that person that wants to marry her, and other evil that might occur. So they said it's not even permissible to do it in indirect way. According to the madhab of Imam Malik and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, of course, they said that it's not permissible to openly wanting to do the khitbah, but they said it's permissible to do the indirect one, because the verse is general. So they said, since this is not transgressing the rights of others because it's a final divorce, then they say it is okay to do the indirect one. According to the madhab, Imam Shafi'i has two opinions. One opinion which is according to what the Ahnaf said, and one opinion according to what the Hanabila said. So what is the correct opinion in this case? You would find in the book or the notebook that was given to you, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But when it comes to this, that there is, for example, some ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as reported by Imam Bukhari and others. But before that, we want to talk about what is the ruling here, or what's the correct opinion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best that it has to be looked into more deeply, with the final divorce. To see how we can find the correct opinion in this, basically by looking what is the type of divorce is it? Is it a major final divorce or it's a minor one? But this detail, inshallah, we'll talk about it later on. So if it's a final and it's a major one, that means the indirect one can be done. But if it's a minor one, then it should be avoided. Another topic that is important when it comes to the engagement, which has a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and actually more than one hadith, about al-khitbah al-khitbah, meaning someone that is already engaged, having promised to pursue the marriage to a certain individual. Is it permissible for another Muslim to interfere and to seek marriage from the same woman or not? And this is something that is not permissible. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, one of which لا يخطب الرجل على خطبة الرجل حتى يدرك الخاطب قبله أو يأذن له, meaning that a person or a man should not get engaged or seek marriage on another marriage or another engagement from another man till the one that is engaged originally, till he leaves, till this engagement is clearly that it's not there anymore. Then it's permissible for someone else to come and to seek marriage. Otherwise, it's not permissible. Otherwise, it is not permissible. So this needs a little bit more explanation, and this is such an important thing because here it might be transgressing the rights of others. But there is more than one case when it comes to someone wants to get engaged to a woman that has already been engaged or things of that nature. Either the first engagement is being denied, someone goes and he wants to get married to a woman and they denied him. In that case, if it's clearly mentioned like that, then someone else can come after that and seek marriage. There is no harm in this. It is permissible. It's not applying the hadith that we mentioned. The second case, if the engagement is accepted and they're going into the path of getting the marriage done, then of course this is not permissible for anyone to come and try to seek marriage from the same woman. This is not permissible because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The third case, if a person went to asking for marriage and they did not give him an answer, and they were still thinking about it, whether they would accept it or reject it or whatever there is it permissible for someone else to come in and to ask for marriage? This is where has differences of opinion among the ulama, and there are famous hadiths mentioned in this regard. When Fatima bint Qais radiallahu anha, she came to the Prophet ﷺ and she told them that Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and Abu Jahm, both of them, they want to get married to her. Khatabaha, they both wanted to get married to her, which is al-khitbah meaning. So the Prophet ﷺ, then told her to get married to Usama ibn Zayd. So that shows that the Prophet ﷺ did not say anything about this is not permissible. But we have to make sure that it is done in such a way that this hadith, for example, maybe they did both at the same time. And it doesn't mean that the guardian of the wife did not respond immediately to the one that is seeking marriage. That means another one can come and seek marriage. No. The correct way and the correct opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, that the matter has to be weighted, because usually when it comes to marriage, people do not just sometimes give the answer right away. They might have to think about it, ask about this person that came. So waiting till the matter is over, whether it's clearly a rejection or acceptance, and then depending on what the outcome is, then another person can pursue or seek marriage from the same woman. Otherwise, a person should wait, and it's not permissible for him to interfere and to ask for marriage, because that would bring so much evenness. If one was rejected and then after that another one seeks marriage from the same person, if the first one gets upset, of course he has no right to get upset, because the matter is over, as it's stated, and the hadith is not applied here. But the hadith applies if the engagement is in place and someone else would come and would seek marriage from the same woman. This is not permissible. This is transgressing upon the rights of another Muslim. Even if they're waiting a little bit, they should also wait. But if we say that someone did that, someone was engaged and someone else came and he said that I want to get married to the same woman, and as a result they took the second one and they rejected the first one. What is the ruling in this? Of course, it's not permissible, it's a sinful act. But what's the ruling in the fiqh point of view? Does that make the marriage not valid, or it's valid, or what's the ruling here? There are three opinions when it comes to this issue. The first opinion, that the aqd, the marriage contract, is sound and it's correct, and this is the majority of the ulama in this opinion. Jumhur al-ulama are in this opinion. But although they say that it's a sound contract, it's a correct contract of marriage, but still the one that did that and interfered, he has committed a sin because he disobeyed the order of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second opinion that says, which is another, the other side, that says the marriage contract is batil, is not valid, and the marriage is not intact. And this is actually a weak opinion. This is opinion of Madhab Dawood al-Zahiri. The third opinion, it says that the contract is not valid, but this is the difference between the batil and غير sahih, meaning when they say that the contract is not correct, but there are some implications that will come as a result of the incorrectness of the contract. And this is basically the madhab or the opinion of Imam Malik rahimahullah, and he gets into more details. If the marriage was consummated, then in that case, if the marriage was not consummated, then in that case the marriage contract has to be terminated immediately. If it's known that the one that made the marriage contract, but the marriage was not consummated, he came and interfered when someone else already had engaged or had the engagement with the woman. If the second case, if the marriage was consummated already, then in that case the marriage is sound and it should not be broken, but the person, of course, he has committed a sin. So this is in the madhab of Imam Malik, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best that the opinion of the jumhur, of the majority of the ulama, is the correct opinion, meaning that the contract is valid and it's a sound contract, but the one that came second, he committed a sin as a result of interfering and asking for marriage when he knew that someone else has already asked for marriage from the same woman. Another thing when it comes to the khitbah or the engagement, the effect of it, or if a person get engaged, what's the right, what's there for both parties, the man and the woman? First, he has the permissibility to look and to see the woman that he wants to get married to, and this is something that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in many ahadith, one of which إذا خطب أحدكم امرأة فلا جناح أن ينظر إليها, that if a person wants to get married to someone, there is no harm in seeing her, right? And seeing her, whether with her knowledge or without her knowledge, it's something that is permissible. And the Prophet ﷺ also ordered one of the companions when he wanted to get married to one of the women of the Ansar, and he told them, فَذْهَبْ فَانْظُرْ إِلَيْهَا, go and look at her because there is something in the eyes of the people of Al-Ansar. So he ordered him to go and see her. And the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِنَّ أَحْرَى أَنْ يُؤْدَمْ بَيْنَكُمَا, that this is more likely, if he goes and sees her, that this is more likely that the relationship will be better, instead of not just getting married to someone that he never saw before. Or he can send someone, his mother or his sister, and she can come back and explain to him what she saw, and she can explain, even give more details which normally it's not permissible, like the hair, the neck, the arms, the clothing that usually the woman would sit and wear in the house in front of her maharim or in front of other women. That can be described to the one that wants to be engaged or wants to get married to her. But when it comes to him seeing, either he can do that without the knowledge of the woman. For example, he hide, not of course without no evil to be involved in this, and only to see her in such a way that would make him make a decision whether he wants to marry her or not, or by her knowledge. But usually this might break the feeling of the woman if he refuses, and she would get to know that he refused because of her look, for example. So it's better to avoid all of these things, seeing a picture, things of that nature. It's something that can be done to avoid the embarrassments and things of that nature. And the Prophet ﷺ, when a woman came to him, he looked at her, ﷺ, and then someone else got married to her, and the Prophet ﷺ did not get married to her. So this look is permissible only if the person needs to see what would make him get married to the woman. More than that is not permissible. Transgressing the limits, because as we know, a Muslim man is ordered to lower his gaze. So it's only something that is an exception, just to see, and he would say, okay, this is it, or no, and he would change the opinion of getting married. But this is something that should be done last, meaning that a person, if he wants to get married, he would ask, and he would get to know about a certain woman, for example. He asks about her, he asks about her religion, and he asks about the things that he looks into a wife. And if all these conditions are fulfilled, and he agrees, and he says, this can be a good future wife for me, then what is left at the end is to see. So that the qabul, or the acceptance, has to be there. And if he sees and he likes what he saw, then the marriage can go on. And if not, then he can, of course, reject and doesn't go further. And of course, the woman has the right, of course, to refuse or to accept. So the majority of the ulama are in the opinion that it's only permissible for the man to see the face and the hands, and that's it. The face and the hands, and that's it. And some said that it's permissible to see more, again, without any evil to be involved in this. Is it something mandatory that he gets her permission? No, he doesn't have to get the permission, and he can send someone to see her, and so on, like this. Also, when it comes to the khitbah or engagements, some people, they go into extremes, and they think that since there is a future promise for the marriage to occur, that means they can break the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's not permissible. This is not marriage in any way or form. It's just a promise that inshallah marriage will be performed. So as a result, once he saw her, once she's also the woman, if she saw the man, and they agreed that this is something that they want to pursue, then it's permissible for them. It's not permissible for them afterwards to see one another, because she's ajnabiyya, she is a stranger woman to him. And that means it's also not permissible for them to be alone in a place. They're not husband and wife yet. So she has to, if they want to speak about something that is important and there's a need of it, then there has to be the presence of a mahram, and has to be only to the point. And she's a stranger woman to him, and he's a strange man to her. That means nothing is permissible. The khitbah would not allow any form of a relationship, going out together, speaking on the phone for a long time for no reason, without the mahram. All of these things should be, of course, avoided, because they already made the decision. If the person went one time and he didn't, for example, he wasn't sure about certain issues, that he wants to have another meeting, then there's no harm, of course, in the presence of a mahram. But once he made the decision that this is the person that I want to get married to, and they accepted him, then there is no such a relationship is valid till the contract or till the marriage is performed. Before that, she is a total stranger woman. Actually, it's more dangerous, because now they might develop certain feelings and things like that, and to fall into the haram, which is something that is very common in engagements and things of that nature. So once they make the decision that they accept the matter and they want to pursue the marriage, they should be away from one another, and they should not compromise the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not permissible for them to be alone. And the Prophet ﷺ said, إِيَّاكُمُ الدُّخُولَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ, beware, be warned not to enter onto the women. So when a man asked the Prophet ﷺ, أَفَرَأَيْتَ الْحَمْ, how about the relative to the husband, like the husband's brother or so? The Prophet ﷺ said, الْحَمُ الْمَوْتِ, that al-ham, or the relative to the husband, is death, meaning he is even stronger, that he is not to enter onto the women in his, like his brother's wife, for example. Why? Because if evil happens between them, it causes death, and it causes so much breaking the ties of the families and things of that nature. So people have to abide by the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and culture play a big role in this, but in which the religion of Islam comes first, and we have to abide by the orders of Allah. Engagement is nothing but a promise that does not go beyond that, does not make it permissible for them to be alone, to go out together, to speak without no need to speak, and to be together without a mahram, and so on, which is something that is not permissible in the deen of Islam. And we know the hadith of that: من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فلا يخلون بامرأة ليس معها ذو محرم منها فإن ثالثهما الشيطان, which means whoever believes in Allah on the day of judgment, he should not be alone with a woman that she does not have a mahram with her, because the third is the shaitan. And this is the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, that does not speak from his desire, he speaks from revelation. Shaitan will be the third, and we know that the shaitan whispers to do evil. And all the means of evil is present, that means they would fall into the evil, and this is something there is no doubt about it. So a person should avoid that, to have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to protect one's religion. When it comes to the khidbah or the engagement, if a person after the engagement, after they agree that this is something good for them, and then they decided not to pursue the marriage and to break the engagement, the implications of that, when it comes to, there many things might happen. There are gifts given, there is mahr that might be had given early on, because the mahr usually goes with the marriage. The dowry is usually given at the time of performing the marriage, but sometimes it be given before that, and a person will give the mahr while he's engaged and things of that nature. So what happens to these things that are taken from the other side? Are they supposed to return it or not? This matter actually has certain differences of opinions, but in general, if the mahr has been given, this is definitely has to be returned, because the mahr or the dowry is given with the intention of marriage. If the marriage is not performed, if the marriage is not going to happen, then in that case the man should take his mahr back. And there's no contract yet. We're not talking about a contract and the marriage was not consummated. This is a different ruling. But we're talking even about engagement only, just a promise, word of mouth, that this is the wife that I want, and they're talking about marriage and what it should be and things of that nature, and then after some time they want to break this khitbah or this engagement, the mahr has to be returned to the man. The mahr has to be returned. This is the mahr. How about the gifts and other things that might be given? If it's something that the culture of the people would see it as part of the mahr, like usually golden bracelet or something, they call it shabka, or the engagement gift or whatever there is that goes with marriage, means that it's only given because this is the future wife, not just to make the heart soft or to have people to like one another, whatever there is, just for the purpose of marriage. This also should be returned. It should be returned exactly the same thing should be returned, or if it's wasted, then they should bring something the like of it, or they should give what is equal to it money-wise. But if it's only gifts, general gifts, that a person coming, for example, to visit the future wife, so he brings some food, for example, or even some gifts to her, although as we have to make sure that this is no sins are involved here, and they should not commit sins, should not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Touching, speaking without the presence of a mahram, all of these things is not permissible. But if a person brings gifts and so on, these gifts, if it's just general gifts like this, has nothing to do specifically with the marriage that people would just do normally in such a relationship, that doesn't have to be returned. And if the future wife would keep it at times of breaking this engagement, she has the right to do that. But some of the ulama, they mentioned it depends. It depends who is the one that is breaking this tie of engagement. If it's the husband, or I'm sorry, there's no husband here and wife. If it's the man, then in that case, she doesn't have to return anything of the gifts. But if it's her, the one that is rejecting him and saying, I don't want to pursue the marriage, then in that case, she should return back all the gifts that he gave her. So this details, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, is more just. That when it comes to the gifts, of course, mahr and what comes under the category of mahr should be returned altogether. But when it comes to the gifts, if the man is the one that is deciding, I want to go ahead and continue this, then in that case, he should not ask for the gifts that he has given, and they don't have to give it back to him. If they give it to him, inshallah, this is out of their goodness, but they don't have to. But when it comes to her decision, and she doesn't want to pursue the marriage, then in that case, she should return all the gifts that he had given her. And this is, again, sounds like the most just opinion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And also people should also understand that this should be done with goodness. And someone might say, is it permissible to break the engagement? Yes. And a wife can do that? Yes. The woman can do that. They're not married yet. Because once the woman is married, then it's not in her authority to implement the divorce. It is the authority of the man. But engagement is not marriage. It's nothing but a promise that this is something that they want to pursue. So if the woman doesn't want to continue with this, she has all the rights to do that, and it's not something that is haram. It's just a promise that can be broken and so on. So inshallah we'll stop at this point with the khitbah, with the engagement, and next time inshallah we continue with the different levels of the marriage and the rights and the contract of the marriage and the different rulings with that. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our deeds. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.